Hi everybody, this is Anne. In my first pottery class, I was taught that the proper way to create a handle was to master the clay pulling technique. My professor knew it was a skill that needed practice and many people would get frustrated with it. Wisely, he required that we all master that technique before looking for alternative ways to achieve a handle. This video is dedicated to all those potters ready to move on to more creative, quick, and even consistent handle techniques. To create the pulled handle, I started out with a plug of clay that's been wedged to remove any air bubbles. The first thing I did is to roll it into a carrot shape. I wet my right hand and began to gently pull the clay down, keeping my fingers curled around like the opening of an extruder, so the clay forms to that shape without getting narrower as the clay gets longer. I then used my fingers to almost sculpt the clay into a flattened top and bottom and tapered sides. Now this is what it should look like. The problem I see most with people just starting out is that the clay gets soggy, the person gets heavy-handed, and the pull gets thin and narrow and delicate at the end to be used on a mug. Let's say you end up with several pulled handles with this problem. Here's one way to make lemonade out of those lemons. I laid two of the handles with the wider edges opposite each other. I cut the top part flat to eliminate the really bulky parts. I stacked one of the pulls on top of the other one so the wider parts now become the north and south ends. I worked the clay together so they're joined and not too delicate at either end. I cut the top flat across and the bottom edge at an angle. I bent the handle into an almost D shape to stiffen up. When it was ready, I attached it to the mug. You can see that on their own, both of the handles would have appeared too thin and delicate. But when you place them together like that, the handles become stronger and the imperfections become a design feature. I've been hearing a lot about neat, hollow handles as a way to disperse the heat from liquid that may otherwise superheat your mug handle in the microwave. Making these is yet another way to avoid pulling. I started with a cardboard tube from a metal coat hanger and a template. I rolled out an 1/8 of an inch wide slab. I cut the template from the slab. I placed it on a piece of plastic wrap. I beveled the long edge. I flipped over the slab and beveled the other side. I scored both edges and slipped one. I placed the tube in the center of the slab, then used the plastic to roll the clay up and over the tube. I continued this motion along the other side until the seam joined up. I worked the seam together with my fingers, yet leaving the joint visible as a design feature. I removed the tube from the center. Now I don't like a round handle, so I flattened it down with the palm of my hand. Now this will make a better grip for the mug. I then worked the edges so they were tapered. I cut the top flat and cut the bottom section at an angle. you can see that the handle's still hollow. I shaped the handle into that D shape gently so I didn't lose the hollowness. When it was stiff, I attached it to the mug. And that makes for a nice stout handle that's big enough for at least 2 fingers. Let's do another hollow handle, this time using a drape mold. I started with a piece of construction insulation found at the hardware store and a 1-inch ruler. I traced the ruler onto the foamular and cut it out with a box cutter. I rolled out another 1/8 inch thick slab of clay. I cut it into 2 sections using the foam cutout as a guide. I placed a piece of plastic wrap over the foam slot. I placed one of the slabs over that and worked the clay down into the cavity just far enough so that it molded into a curved top. I then took it off the mold and peeled away the plastic. I did the same thing to the other slab. I then cut away the excess clay at a slight inward angle with my needle tool to begin a beveled edge so they'll fit together easier. I beveled down the clay along the edges with my fingers. I turned over each slab and gently scored the clay edges at an inward direction. To join them, I started with one edge and matched them together, then folded the top over and matched the opposite edge as well. I could then pinch the edges closed with my fingers. Now you can leave the seam edges as design choices or close them up. I cut the top edge flat, and like the others, I angled the cut along the bottom. I bent it into shape, then attached it to the mug. Now here's one I made earlier where I did a little sculpting to the edges and the bottom side when it was leather hard. Now how about molding a pottery handle? I'm going to use the polymer clay found in any craft store as the mold. I first needed to condition the polymer clay by squeezing it and getting it soft enough to use. I then rolled the clay out to a long, thick coil. I used my rolling pin over the top of the long side to flatten it out just a little. Now this brush with the bamboo handle was a perfect width to make an impression. I placed the handle over the clay and worked it into the center. I then worked the sides of the clay up and around the bamboo brush, flattening the sides of the polymer. I rolled the brush from side to side a little to give the mold an oval cavity and to help with the release. This clay hardens when it's baked in the oven following the package directions. Here's one that I already baked. To use the mold, I rolled out a thick coil of clay, then worked it into the cavity. I use my wire tool to wire off the excess clay at the top, then work the rest of it off with my fingers to make nice edges. I cut off one end of the clay but left the other longer. I used that clay as a pull to peel away the clay gently from the mold for this perfect handle. Like the ones before, I just cut the top flat and angled the bottom. I bent it into a D shape and attached it. The good thing about using a mold to create the handle is that you get a consistent shape and size every time. Now let's talk about handle shapes. Let's say you want to recreate the shape of a handle from a mug you already have. In this case, I love this Teresa peach handle. I again used the polymer clay and pushed it into the negative space of that handle, completely filling it up. Now I can push the clay back out of the other side, and I have the perfect shape of that handle. Now I just needed to create a handle blank and mold it around the form and let it stiffen up. When it's ready, I can then attach it. Here I drew a life-size mug and designed a unique handle shape for it. The dotted lines down here are where I want to attach a little clay as a design element. I molded a piece of polymer clay to fit the negative space inside the handle in hopes of molding a clay blank over it. Now let's give it a try. I started along the top crevice, then wrapped the clay around the mold to the end. Once it was on the mold, I was able to sculpt the edges along the bottom section down and angled back, which is what I envisioned. When it was stiffened up, I attached it to the mug. I then added a little extra clay, like in the drawing, and worked that edge to a sharp point. Now this is just how I drew it up. Finally, I'll show you a handle hack bonus. For a quick and easy way to make perfect handle blanks, you may want to consider investing in one of the diamond core handle extruders. This one is the R8. I just opened up my clay bag and carved the top of a flat clay block from one end to the other. It gives me a perfect strip every time. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.